Welcome to the Intern Whisperer. The show is all about the future of work and innovation. So today's Intern Whisperer's tip of the week is when mentoring, it is really important to remember that no one person has all answers. Many times students will come in that are your interns. They're going to be working with you. They're very self-conscious that they're making mistakes. So one of the things that you as a mentor can do is just remind them that you know that they're going to mess up. You messed up. You still mess up, every day, and it's okay because that's really where we learn. And one of the biggest things they can do is just remind them that if they see a problem, they want to be the first one that identifies it, even if it's something they did, and bring a solution that helps them to gain confidence and helps them stand apart. So today's guest is Rajiv Menon, Informulate. So Rajiv, go ahead, and I'd like to say howdy. Welcome for being on the show. Very excited.
Thanks, Isabella. Great to be here.
Thank you. Our show's all about education, innovation, and the future of industries and work. So let's kick it off with some fun questions so we can get to know you first. Tell us about yourself using only 5 words and why those 5 words are significant.
Sure, I'll do my best. I'd say experimentation, creativity, impact, persistence, and curiosity. Those would be my 5 to start with, and I can go through and explain each of them.
Yeah, go ahead and share why.
Yeah, so experimentation, I love going in and experimenting with different ideas, different concepts, different ways of doing the same thing. I'm a big fan of the 4-Hour Work Week and Tim Ferriss and those kinds of books that encourage you to go out and try radically different ways of doing something. And that's always been part of my nature. That's kind of what I do at Informulate as well, helping our clients to come up with data-driven experiments to move their business forward and to validate certain markets before they enter them and that kind of thing. Creativity, of course, is kind of a brother of experimentation, I guess, coming up with new ways of doing things. And then experimentation is more of a scientific process of how you roll that creativity out. I love doing creative things and being self-expressive, as I'm sure you saw at Startup Weekend with the rap that I'd come up with.
Yes, you did. That was hilarious.
Thank you. Yes, I try to do different things like that. Just get out of the comfort zone. I write. I've written a short story. I write poems. I used to write songs, as you know, and all kinds of different things. Of course, creativity in business. That's kind of why I have my own business, was because I felt kind of stuck in the Fortune 500 consulting world, and I had to do my own thing because I feel like the most learning that you can have is when you're doing something creative. Impact. So, I mean, all of this stuff, experimentation and creativity is great, but if it doesn't result in an impact, then I don't know if it's worthwhile at the end of it. So part of what I like to do is, you want to express yourself and have all that other thing, but at the end of the day, the impact that you create on other people, on our city, in the tech community, and in our clients that I consult with is really the bottom line. Is how do you move that forward? How do you make people's lives better? How do you improve conditions for users and all of that? Persistence. So I didn't really know that I was persistent until, when I started doing my own business, and I realized that, everybody I talked to and I shared my story with, they were like, wow, you just kept going through all of that. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, what else? And they're like, yeah, you could just quit. And I never really considered those options. For me, it's like until, it's like keep going till the fat lady sings kind of situation where it's not over till it's over. You just go and, keep going until you don't have a choice but to stop. I don't want to make that decision until I've exhausted the options that exist in front of me. So I generally push to the wall in terms of persistence. And, this has happened right at the beginning of the company. Was we had a very, I had 2 partners when I started, and they both dropped off within the first couple of years because things were just really hard. We had a full-time job. We were all in the same company, and we decided to do this thing on the side. And one of my friends actually was really good at marketing, and he was a very personable guy, and people really trusted him, and we got a bunch of business right off the bat. So we had a bunch of clients, and but then it was really hard to balance full-time job and the business that was growing. and we were working primarily offshore at the time. So it was really hard, like working, 16-hour days, kind of staying up late, dealing with offshore, and then working a full-time job, and then talking to clients in between meetings. So it wasn't easy. And then, it got to a point where both my partners quit. And I had already made all these commitments to these existing clients. I didn't really want to break those commitments because I knew that they'd invested time and money into their projects. So I just kept going, and one thing led to another, and slowly I started getting recommendations, and people started giving me referrals, and got to a point where I was able to quit my full-time job. I think it was like 4 or 5 years in, actually. And it's been 15 years since I started the business. And it was only 4 or 5 years in that I was able to quit and focus on the business full-time. So I guess that's the persistence part for you.
Oh my God, yeah. Don't you know that we always have to tell other entrepreneurs that what we do is really hard, and people go, oh yeah, I want to start a business. I don't think they have the faintest idea what it takes to make it be successful. It's a lot of sacrifice. Were you married and had kids then also?
I was married and I had kids then, yes.
Yeah, so you didn't mention that. So your 16-hour days were all filled with work, but then there's still this wife and kids that, they need some nurturing too. So you're talking about a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I started the business, we did not have kids. And so that was the time when we were very, very young. And I'd had some 16-hour days at that time too. And then we had kids, and that's when my partners quit, was when I had kids. And so I had additional responsibility. I actually quit when my second child was born. My daughter was born, was when I really quit, and I decided to focus on the business exclusively. But yeah, it wasn't easy, and I wouldn't have been able to do it, of course, without my wife, who quit her job. So she had a full-time job that she quit in order to take care of the kids. And then I was able to focus on that. Of course, that's a luxury that not many people have, but in our case, we did have that luxury and that privilege. So we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. I know it does. Yeah, it's not for babies, anybody that wants to start a business, that's for sure. So then that's interesting. I did not know that you had partners. When you came up with the name Informulate, was that something that you and the partners came up with, or did you do a brand change once they left?
No, my belief on branding is more, that the brand is created by the delivery and the actions and the promises that you keep and make, and that kind of thing. So for me, I wasn't really tied to any particular name. I mean, it's a cool name, I think, and my partner came up with it. And he wanted to make a word that didn't exist. So Google, didn't exist. You want to make it a word that people use. So I'm going to encourage everybody to say, informulate a solution from now on, is a way of looking at how you innovate and execute on something, is Informulate. There you go. That's how he thought of that word, was Informulate. And I was like, sure, let's go with that. Pretty much. And yeah, so the fifth word that I was using to describe myself is curiosity. And for me, I'm extremely curious about everything. So it doesn't matter if it's whatever field of study, or it doesn't matter, if it's theoretical or abstract or very, very practical or whatever it is. I'm very curious about everything. And I want to know, that's why I like what I do very much. And I enjoy what I do, is because I get to work with, one day I'm working with Stanford University, California. Next day I'm working with Guidewell Innovation. I'm working with a tiny startup over here. I'm mentoring a social impact business over there. So that I just enjoy the different markets, and really gets me to understand the business world in a much better way when I am touching it in different ways. I invest my own money in stocks. I invest in angel investing for a couple of startups here. So I'm just very curious from that point of view. And the more diverse I can get with my investments, as well as my consulting, as well as my mentoring, the happier I am.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I did not know that you also invest. So that's another interesting thing that's there, is it definitely feeds into your passion for Techstars Startup Weekend. So you get to see really cool technologies come out and go, oh yeah, that one should be good, because now you've dabbled in a lot of industries. you've played around with different sizes of businesses and different entity types. So whether it's nonprofit, yeah, I know that you've been involved in that area, as well as government and different, like I said, different entity types. So you speak multiple languages, and it doesn't mean verbal languages, it means business languages, I think.
That's true. Yeah. And that's true on both counts, actually. When I was writing code, I was doing multiple languages. When I'm talking to businesses, I'm using different business languages. And yes, I do speak actual languages too. I speak languages.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what languages do you speak? I know we're jumping around a little bit, but obviously English, you're perfect. So I think you were raised here and this is your native language.
Well, that's kind of true. Actually, English is my native language because that's the language I'm the most fluent in. Even though I was born and raised in India, that's the language I spoke to my parents in for whatever reason. And that's not common. Most Indian households have a different language, a mother tongue that they speak. Mine actually was Malayalam, is the language that my parents were born and raised in. But we moved from our town in South India to Mumbai. And Mumbai, at the time it was called Bombay, spoke a different language. And so that was Hindi and Marathi. There were two languages there, which I also dabble in. So yeah, if you were to count the language, I would say English is the one I'm most fluent in. Hindi is next. I can speak Hindi pretty fluently. Malayalam is my parents' language, which I speak. Sometimes I speak to my wife in Malayalam because my kids don't know it very well. So if we're trying to say something kids don't want to hear, we'll talk in Malayalam. And Marathi is another language that I can kind of make my way in through that because I was in Bombay and that's the local language there. And these are all separate languages with their own script, by the way. So It's not a dialect, it's actually a full-blown language that's completely different. And then there's Tamil, which is a language that my neighbors spoke, so I learned some from them. And I don't think I can have a conversation in French, but I can read and write French. And I learned French for like 5 years. So I can navigate Montreal, for example.
Oh, that's handy to have. When you were talking about that, Kunal's been a guest on the show, and he had shared previously that, he speaks all of these other languages also. But it's really funny that when he goes back to India, people automatically, they can tell right away that you're not from here, because he doesn't even have to open his mouth, but I guess there's something he gives off. And I went, how could they know? It's like, to me, when he speaks it, I'm sitting there going, it sounds like the real thing to me, but yet I guess it's the same. I can tell if somebody is like really from here or not sometimes if they speak.
I think Kunal was raised here, wasn't he?
I don't think so. I think he grew up there for a little bit as a child, and then he came over here.
Gotcha. But he was not an adult when he came here. Yeah, I came here when I was 24, so much later in life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's very interesting. I believe when I was talking with your kids, I asked them if they spoke any other languages. They told me no. So maybe they didn't want to, show that they could speak other languages. They don't
speak any other languages.
Really?
We didn't teach them any of the other stuff. I mean, we're just being lazy parents. I wish we had. There's so much we teach them, but languages are a whole investment. Like, you got to really make the effort.
Oh yeah.
Just never got around to it.
Do you ever plan on sending them back to the family in India so that they can, for 3 months, come back speaking it?
Well, we typically take vacations every 2 years. We go to India. So every other year we go to India, and every other year our parents come here. So they see their grandparents every year. And so they do get quite a bit of interaction that way. And they know a few words, like they know what water is and they know the numbers in our language, but they can't really have a conversation.
Gotcha. That's what Duolingo is for, right?
That's right.
It's there to help people. Yeah, I practice my Spanish that way. And anytime I get inside of a lift, it's been really helpful because I can just pull that up in Google Translator. I can at least communicate somewhat with what my needs are.
Actually, that's how Annie is learning Hindi now. It's funny because Hindi is one of the most widely spoken languages in India, but it's not very popular in the South, which is where she's from. So nobody speaks Hindi on the street. And you only get, if you watch Hindi movies, which she doesn't watch. So she, for some reason, decided to take that on. Now she's doing Hindi from sitting here in America. She's learning Hindi now.
Oh, well, I think that there's probably some communities around because I know there's Haitian communities and there's Chinese community. There's a Chinese school where people go to learn. I've had a lot of exchange students live with me, and one of them came from China. So she went over to Winter Park. They have the ninth grade center has a Chinese school. And so they teach anybody that wants to learn Chinese how to read, write, and speak it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That'd be
I'm
good
going to
for.
guess that maybe there's a community of Indian culture where your kids could be immersed somewhat in that, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, we just got them in so many activities at this point, because we've got them in, all the sports and the
Yeah.
music, the chess, and, there's just so many things that we have them engaged in right now that we just really haven't dived into that. I think the closest immersion we've got is when we actually take them to India. And,
Mhm.
I've got some nonprofit work that I do there, and they had a really good time when we went to this project that actually, I don't know if I've told you this before, but Sunira and I fund the education of about 24 kids in India.
No. Tell
And
us.
yeah, absolutely. So my wife's uncle is someone who does a lot, who has done, work in that space for 3 decades. And he has a lot of, different projects all over the country. And one of the projects he was looking for funding for was this project in the middle of the country, right in the middle of India, called Khandwa. It's a tiny town there, and he's got an even tinier little village next to it called Sudamapuri, which is just, extremely poor. Like, people are living in tents, and it's super hot. There's no water, all kinds of issues. And so he set up his center there, and there's all these tribal kids that basically have no access to any real education, and the public schools are not great. So we actually are sending them to private school. So we're funding them going to private school in an English medium so they can learn English. And of course, English is the language of business in India. So if you speak English, you have a much better chance of moving up faster than if you speak the local languages, which will only get you so far. So that's, and he is my wife's uncle has worked with a whole generation of tribal kids, and some of them ended up starting their own like software SEO companies from India. So
Wow.
transform their life in one generation. And part of it is because I've been involved in so many projects, and those are like light touch projects, I like to call it, where I touch somebody, for example, startup weekend, I'll touch them for a weekend and then they're off and I never see them again, right? Potentially never see them again. So that's a light touch, but I get to hit a lot of people, right? And then what I wanted to do here was, let's do a deep touch. We're going to stay with these people, with these kids for 12 years is my commitment, or maybe 16, and I might even fund their, college education. If we stay there for 12 to 16 years with one group of people, we'll have a much deeper touch with a smaller group of people.
Oh gosh, I hope you have a whole study designed around that and you're measuring the success of that.
I should. It's been what, 4 years now, 5 years, something like that, since we started. And of course, I'm getting annual reports and I go visit them every chance we get. Of course, now with the pandemic, I haven't seen them in 2 years. But it was one of the great experiences, was because I really wanted to get my kids involved and engaged in that. So I took them to India and we stayed there. It was super hot and dusty and everything like that. And there was no resources necessarily. And these were kids who are not used to any of that. And they were just I was worried about all kinds of things, right? Going in there, I'm like,
Yeah.
They're probably going to get sick. It's dirty. It's this, it's that. And they just had a blast. They had a great time. Those local, they don't even speak the same language, because my kids don't speak Hindi and those kids don't speak English very well, but they have like broken English a little bit. And so they were able to communicate. They played a bunch of games. They were just at it. Didn't want to stop. They didn't want to come back. They were like playing in 100-degree weather. And they're like, I'm just going to keep playing all day.
Yeah, that's really a really good testimony as to what inclusion can be when you don't speak the same language. That is really a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Startup Weekend before we go into the next side of some of those personal questions. Let's tell our listeners what Startup Weekend is. Why did you even get involved with that? Because you're one of the main organizers. And just like in TED, do you have to go and get a license to be the organizer in this area?
No, nothing like that. So I first heard of, when I came to Orlando, that was 2006. and I had no connections in the community. And what I do as I love being part of the community and being a part. I wanted to find the group, right? I wanted to find a group of people to
Right.
hang and do tech stuff with. And at the time, I was an employee, as I mentioned. And so I looked it up, and of course, I came across the .NET user group, OneTug, which was Esteban. Yeah, Esteban was the founder of that, and I remember going to one or two of those. And then from there, I found out about the Orlando Tech Group that
Jacques.
Oret was
Oh,
running.
Arret. Yeah.
Oret was running at the time, and they had those night pitches, the monthly pitches and all of that stuff going on. And so that's how I got connected to the community, and I started showing up to those things like every other month or so. And then Oret and Ron Benziv, I believe.
I love Ron.
Yeah. And so they were the ones who were doing the startup weekend back in the day. And I participated, even though I had my business and I was already running my business successfully and profitably at the time. I still wanted to get a taste of it, but I was very insecure and I didn't know how good this was, how good I was, and how hard this competition was going to be. And I was like, I'm still going to go out and push myself because I'm curious and I want to get out of my comfort zone. And I'm so glad I did, because there's so many things I learned from that, and really kind of turbocharged my transition, which I was already happening in my mind, was going from just building software to building software that solves business problems, because that's a whole different thing. So you can write software all you want, but if it doesn't solve the business problem or meet the customer need, then it's not going to be used. So that transition was already happening in my head, and I was trying to come up with my own frameworks, which we have 3 of our own frameworks at Informulate now, which are Experiment, Execute, Transform is a framework for new product development. Standardize, Automate, Monitor, Iterate is a framework we created for scaling companies. And Innovation Governance is another framework we developed to help large initiatives where you have multiple departments collaborating. So all this was going on, it was kind of the seeds of that were coming out. And when Startup Weekend came up, I really got the firsthand experience of doing customer discovery in a very aggressive time frame, and all the things that you know about already.
You're right.
But for me, that was a great experience, and I loved it. I came back next year, even though I did it once. I wanted to do it again. I actually came back 3 times, and I wanted to get as much experience in that as possible, because I really felt it was helping my entrepreneurship. And then I came back as a mentor 1 or 2 times, and well, I think a total of 4 times. Yeah, twice as a participant and twice as a mentor. And then it disappeared for a while. Like for years, there was nothing. I think for 3 years, there was no Startup Weekend. And by then, my business had picked up, and I was in it full time and everything like that. When I ran into Dennis, and Dennis was like, "Hey, what happened to Startup Weekend?" Oh, I loved it. It was fantastic. I could actually see these business ideas being launched, and it's like one of the most impactful things I've ever experienced as an event. Not one of the most impactful of any event I've ever seen. And why is it not happening? And Dennis was like, "Yeah, that's a shame. Someone should do it." And I was looking at him and like, "Yeah, someone should do it." And then we both realized that, yeah, we're going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's you guys. So Canal's really big in the game jams for sure. I did not know that Ron Benziv. I started with 1 Million Cups, and Ron Benziv was one of the organizers there, and he's the one that pulled me into 1 Million Cups. So that's how I got into that. But I did not know he was a part of Startup Weekend.
Yeah, he was.
And that's very, very interesting. I really like Ron a lot. He's a really good guy. So is Oret. I like both of those guys.
They both did a lot for the community.
They sure did. Yeah. Anyway, so that's good to know. Now, are you going to be doing this as an annual event, or is it going to be something that goes twice a year? There was a lot of interest.
There is now. I'll tell you, when the reason it had disappeared for a bit was because people had lost interest. And I think it's very important that something like this, you keep the quality of that event and the experience that people get, and also the kind of demand for it is important to maintain, and having those relationships up front. It's not easy, I'll tell you that much, because in 2017, 2018, we really had to push hard to get people out. 2019 was definitely much easier, but then now with the pandemic, we didn't do one in 2020. But now I see 2021, we exceeded our targets by 50%. We were targeting 60 people and we had 89. So I can definitely feel like the demand is back now, and that there's a lot of awareness of what Startup Weekend is now, which we want to make sure that we capture. And I think I'm definitely, we were already talking about doing it twice a year. We're not a large city from that point of view. And, like I was saying at Startup Weekend, we have we get 50 to 100,000 impressions. And that's how much it takes just to get, 50, 60 people to sign up. So the turnaround there, I mean, it is a big commitment. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Cash commitment, but that's not that high. And we can usually get people in through universities for practically free. But the time commitment, and there is so much competition for mind space right now. Nobody wants to give up their weekend. So that's a big commitment from a time perspective. That is the harder push, because even if you have that many people signing up, how many people actually show up and actually stay till the end of the weekend? That is the number that is the most important for me. So I think we want to be careful about how many we do. We definitely want to start. I think we want to shoot for 2 next year, though.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. And sometimes if you put it in different counties instead of just Orange County, if you move it over to Seminole or Osceola, you'll get a completely different crowd. That would be a suggestion I would give you.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I think I've got a meeting for you with that.
Yes, I know who you're talking about, Rebecca, right?
Yes.
Yes, I'm meeting Rebecca next week. We're going to be talking about that. Or maybe this week, I forget. But I
think I'm meeting with you this week, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm talking to Rebecca. She wants to do one in Palm Beach, and I'm happy to help and spread the word, because like I said, it's a very impactful event, but we also need to make sure that it's managed the right way.
Yeah, that's how TEDx is done also. And that's really where I got to meet Ron there too, because he was one of the guys that helped bring TEDx to Orlando. He's an innovator just like yourself. So I had said, hey, I want to be on that TEDx team. And I was thrilled when I got to come in and be on the Startup Weekend team, because, that is really where we see that we can push the needle forward and we get a lot of great ideas. I was so impressed with the caliber of the companies that came out of it, or concepts, we'll say, and they came out and look, cold hard cash, 54 hours, already made money. And I went, wow, if we had that all the time, that type of push, really, we would see a lot more growth, I think, in startup world for sure.
I agree. And there's a few challenges, but it does take a lot of time and energy. And I'm hoping that we can, now that we have a little bit more visibility and notoriety, and we had the mayor come out now, I think that changes the dynamic significantly. I think the fundraising should be a lot easier going forward for us.
And you timed it really beautifully with also Synapse, which for our listeners we have a lot of listeners outside of Florida too. This podcast has listeners all over the world, a lot in France, just so you know, but we have had a lot of interest, and it's always in this startup conversation. So for those people that are wanting to know more, definitely reach out to Rajiv if you want to know more about a Startup Weekend. We'll cover that at the end of the show, but there is a lot of commitment that happens. People truly will come out for the weekends. It is 54 hours long. I've been at those where we spend the night and we're working late, and then we get up early in the morning. So it's a big commitment. You're right.
It is. Yeah. And to your French listeners, bonjour, madame et monsieur.
Ah, yeah. Very nice. Okay, so most influential person in your life and why? They can be living or dead.
Yeah, I guess this is a no-brainer for being an Indian, but Gandhi is definitely at the top of the list. For me, he is one of the most amazing human beings who ever lived, not just because of what he did for the freedom struggle and all of that, but really just as a human being. He transformed himself in his self-transformation journey, which I've read his autobiography and watched the movie and kind of gone through that a few times. So his journey there of self-transformation was incredible, where he was able to, he went to London for his studies, and he had money and he had whatever he wanted, but he decided to kind of take all that away and focus on what he thought was more important, and basically change his life around for that. So unbelievable there. I think he's just like, I think somebody quoted it best when they said he was like 90 pounds of pure willpower. And that really appealed to me, is how much impact someone can make with that, just willpower. And that's
Yeah.
definitely top of the list. Second, I would say Elon Musk. Just because, I think he's in a group of one. I mean, even no matter how far back you go back in history, to me, at this point, it's very, very clear. I've been following him for 6, 7 years, maybe 8 now. But as of right now, he's the richest person, I think, in the world. So now it's pretty obvious to everybody what he was. But 6 years ago, when Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy and SpaceX was on the verge of bankruptcy, not many people knew him. So yeah, he's incredible in the way that not only did he achieve those things, but he did them in extremely difficult
Circumstances.
Both personally, and the industries that he picked to make an impact in were not industries that he picked because he wanted to make a quick buck. He picked those industries because the challenge was super hard. And that is what is absolutely unique about him. Like, I mean, when you compare him to Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or anybody else, they were definitely great entrepreneurs, unbelievably great entrepreneurs. But Elon Musk is head and shoulders above them in my book. And third, I would say the person who's very influential in my life right now is my wife, is because we come from very different, although we're both from India, we come from extremely different backgrounds. She comes from a Christian background, and I came from a Hindu background, which I'm not really religious anymore. But I think, and just the way that her family dynamic was versus my family dynamic, and just learning so much about nurturing from her with the kids and all of that. As you can tell, I'm a very switched on kind of guy, where I'm always go, go, go.
Yes.
So there's a lot that I learned about kind of the other aspects of, how, like empathy and human relationships. Not that I was unempathetic, but I was always, my empathy came from a place of, let's work together to solve this problem kind of empathy. Whereas, there's a lot I had to learn. My family, we didn't celebrate anything for whatever reason. Like, I didn't even know when my parents' birthdays were.
Really?
Their anniversaries or anything like that. So we were just like, yeah, we're family. We love each other. What's there to celebrate,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, then you are an evolved person now. So
yeah, it definitely has come a long way. So that's part of my ongoing growth there, which now I've stopped thinking like huge picture, and also like think about this, kind of the everyday miracles, as you said.
Yes. Well, we're going to take just a moment to acknowledge our sponsor. And
The Intern Whisperer is brought to you by Cat5 Studios, who help you create games and videos for your training and marketing needs that are out of this world. Visit Cat5 Studios for more information to learn how Cat5 Studios can help your business. Thank you, Cat5 Studios.
Okay, so we're back to our show. We're going to be focusing on the future jobs and industries in 2030. And because you are in software, I would really like to hear what you think it's going to look like in 2030. Do you have any idea? Remember, it's all open to interpretation, and we really don't know. That's quite a few years away. Almost now, we're going to say 8 instead of 9. But what do you think?
In terms of what it looks like, what the job market looks like?
Let's start with the industry first, because we can build now. People can actually create software without it knowing any code. Right. And we'll look at Wix. That's not to me, it's like a giant PowerPoint. And all I'm doing is building things on top of each other. Now, I don't know how to code, but I can build a PowerPoint. And so I can do a Wix website.
Yep, absolutely. And there's more and more of those LowCode NoCode tools out there now. There's hundreds, if not thousands of them, and they're just going to get better and better. So it's going to make it a lot more accessible. And I think if anybody's listening right now and they think that software is like this thing for nerds that is really hard to do and you need to know math, you don't need to know any math at this point to write software or to develop applications. It is very, very accessible. And I think our friends at Black Orlando Tech are doing a fantastic job taking people literally from 24K jobs to 85K jobs in a matter of 1 year. And that is something that more and more people need to be aware of, is that it's very, very accessible.
I would agree with you. So one of my goals is to be able to upskill a person, make 3 months of an internship equivalent to 1 year of experience. That's hard to do, but I'm going,
Yeah.
I know how to do that. And that's where I'm going to sit down with you and Jacques and have a conversation. You just didn't know that, but
We are, definitely.
Yeah, because I've already told Jacques this, and I said, yeah, I want to sit down. Because all three of us have similar interests in that work, the future of work. And I went, yeah, definitely. Anyway, back to our original question on the industry. When I talk with students that are considering a career path, I go, I wouldn't even mess with programming. Go straight into AI. You need to be studying that. That's the black box, and everybody's still trying to figure that one out. So go into there. And for the most part, that's really where I think, that's what I think we should be doing.
Even AI. I mean, so there's a whole stack, right? And there's people working on different levels of that stack. If you were to talk about people who are in the forefront of AI, like that's like the 0.1 or 0.01% of the people that are really looking at rewriting the algorithms from a mathematical perspective and applying like cross-functional, cross-domain knowledge of how the brain works and neurons and neurology into creating different algorithms and all of that stuff. That's a whole different ballgame, right? But at this point where we are today in 2021, about to be 2022, AI is much more accessible. Like you have low-code, no-code solutions for AI too. Like if you want to do a correlation tool, if you want to do a recommendation engine, those problems are already solved. So you just need to know how to plug and play those things. And you can say that you are in AI and that you can develop AI-enabled applications, also no-code, low-code.
So you might need to break that down just so our listeners know what that means, because not everybody does. So low code, no code, what does that actually mean? Give maybe a bit of more concrete explanation.
Absolutely. So back in the day, if you wanted to build a website, I'm taking you way back in the day, 20, 30 years, you would have to write HTML code, which is with the tags and the, BR for line break and all of that stuff. And then you had CSS come on top of it, which was styles. And then you had JavaScript come on top of it, which was enabling you to do some scripting. And you had to actually write that code, like type it out in a text editor and then publish it. And then you'd see if it worked or not. And so that is code. And then you had the backend code, which was going to the database, connecting to that, getting you back information. And that was the backend code, and you had the front end code. And that's your application. So you had to know like 4 different languages and the database script in SQL 5 really in order to make a web application work. And that's, if you had a good stack, and sometimes you had more.
And for our listeners, that's a full stack developer.
That is a full stack developer, exactly. Yeah. So you need HTML, CSS, you need JavaScript, a backend language, and the
SQL.
Database. Yep, SQL. So now you don't need to know any of that. Like you said with Wix or with Salesforce, you can just define your object, your entity, and it'll create the database for you. It'll create the front end for you. You just move them around and make it look like whatever form you want. You have pre-built styles that come in, and so you don't even need to know styles. So really, and everybody at this point is using web and mobile applications all the time. So you know what design looks like. So it's very accessible to everybody to use these low-code, no-code tools to build applications.
So do you think, now I'm going totally rogue on you here, just so you know. I'm wondering if we're ever going to get away from laptops. My answer is yes, I believe we will. There's also been a bigger move, years ago, people were saying, oh, everybody needs to have an app. Yeah, people have apps, but like, what would be the next thing if it's not doing it on a laptop or a hard, some type of a big desktop, and then also having an app, because I feel like it will probably be embedded in us somewhere, or like on, we do Google Watch, right? So,
I think it's mixed reality is the next big thing in my book, because the glasses are going to become a thing. I know Google Glass came out and it was a mess and people rejected it and it never went
Yeah.
anywhere. But it's coming back in smaller ways, and there's multiple manufacturers of smart glasses now. And the AR world and the smart glasses world are going to combine, and there's going to be mixed reality with your glasses, which is where I think the next generation, that's going to be the platform that you build apps on. Is, hey, why don't you build a mixed reality app? So I could build like a face recognition app, I could build like a note-taking app on your glasses that you can talk to, or you can move things around and actually interact with it with just glasses on. So I think that's going to be the new interface that we all get comfortable with.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I've also seen some other technology that comes out, I think it was from Japan, where they had 3 types of pins and they would put it together, and one would be a screen so that you could see, whatever it is that you're like a definite screen. And then you rolled it out and there was a virtual little keyboard. And I went, wow, that would be amazing to have stuff like that. And I'm sure it's there. I just don't know where it is, but.
You said 3 pens?
Yeah, I thought it was 3 pins. Like
okay.
They look like, how they could make like a little teepee. And when you put it together, it would project a screen. And then there was a monitor, well, not a monitor, but there was a place to type as the keyboard. And then the pins themselves were, I guess, the drive itself. But I was thinking, wow, that would be so cool to have something like that. So you don't have to carry the laptop anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a great example of someone with a watch, which is, it looks just like a Fitbit. You press a button on it, and it projects onto your hand, onto your arm, a keyboard and an interface, and you can basically type right on your arm. And all you need
wow.
But we're not even going to need that, because once we get to the point where the smart glasses evolve enough, you would just be able to type in the air, because your glasses will show you what it needs to see, and nobody else can see what you're seeing because you're the only one wearing the glasses. So it's completely secure. You don't need to display your keyboard or even have other people know what you're seeing, because it's just gonna be you interacting in full privacy.
That would be really cool. I have a lot of other questions about that one, but I'll save that for another time. Okay, COVID, how has it impacted business? I think in the software world, I don't know if there was anything that was really impacted, because it seemed to make it easier for more people to work distance as well as remote. So as a job market, I think it made it a lot better for people. However, I don't know if there was really any type of an impact on that. Maybe people not being able to go to school, and they were used to being on the ground at school. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, COVID definitely turbocharged the tech space. No doubt about it. Like, everything tech enabled just became so much more valuable, because people weren't using physical things as much. They were needed virtual ways of doing everything. And it sped up the adoption of a lot of technologies that were kind of on the curve like this. And then when COVID happened, it took off. Like, obviously Zoom and, other collaboration.
Overnight, Zoom, overnight, it seemed. Yeah.
Yeah. And like things like Miro, because I mean, there's a reason why people want to work in person, is because the bandwidth of your interaction is so much higher, because there's a body language, and there's, voice, and not, on Zoom, only one person can speak, because there's, you can't talk over each other because it gets messy on Zoom. But when you're in person, you interrupt each other, your body language will let you get away with it. Things like that. And then of course, you can't have a quiet moment in a Zoom call, because people feel the need to fill it in. And if you're done talking, then you feel like, okay, I think we should probably get off the call now. But if you're in person, there's a little bit of a lull in the conversation, you don't feel as bad. And so what happens is you lose a lot of the nuances that you may, or the optional conversations get dropped, and you only have the required conversations happening on Zoom. And so the collaboration tools still need to evolve. Maybe the metaverse and people meeting in virtual reality and having high bandwidth conversation again is one way to possibly mitigate that and be fully virtual. I don't know if it'll really do a good job though, in terms of.
I don't think it will, because people like to hide behind the camera. They'll put their cameras up. I let my game team get away with that. But for the most part, I sit here and go, no, I can't tell if you're really, like engaged or when I'm on my software team call, I sit there and was watching one of my team members and I'm going, ooh, he looks like he's getting really upset about something. He goes to school full time. He's at Berkeley. And then he's also, doing this. And I went, he's going to bail on me. I don't want him to bail. And if he was hiding behind the camera, he had his camera off, then I might not see his body language. And that is everything. I think the body language is huge. I agree with you.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think there is something being lost in that, in that transition. But how it impacted business, I think for tech folks like me, and it's been a great boon. Honestly, everybody was terrified in Q2 of 2020. Nobody knew what the job was going to be. Nobody knew if the job was going to exist, who was going to get fired, how we're going to buy things, toilet paper scare.
Yeah, for sure.
All of that stuff was happening at the same time. But I think
I remember having in-depth conversations with schools saying, hey, we need to have remote internships 5 years ago. And every school would shut me down and they would say, no, we aren't doing that. There was like, no, we got to keep them on the ground. That was the biggest mistake. And then COVID happened and then they're all going, oh, well, how do we do this? And they had to figure it out overnight. It was so frustrating. It was frustrating because I was seeing it at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was not that hard because a lot of our folks were already used to remote work. And so transition from a work perspective wasn't hard for us. The biggest question was, who our clients were going to be and whether our existing clients could if they were in the right industry, because certain industries were really hammered, like hospitality and other things. And so there was a whole thing of, we don't know what the second order effects are. And luckily everything played out well. And, I don't know if you know the stats on this, but in 2020, we had the most venture funding since the dot-com boom. And then 2021, we exceeded that number with like 2-3 months to go. So the amount of funding going into tech right now is unbelievable.
Oh, I agree. All right. Question. Well, we covered robots and augmented reality and all of that. So I pulled something from a source called Upskilled, and they were looking at the labor market. And they said that in 23.5%, there's a projected 23.5% growth for programmers. I think that's probably not even close to being accurate. I think that it's going to be bigger than that because that's going to be the career path that most people need to have.
I mean, those projections are, of course, projections, and it's very hard to know what the reality of that is going to be. I mean, some of the smartest people in the world make terrible projections. It is possible that that's the right number because the productivity per worker is going up so much that they'll be able to accomplish a lot more with some of the advanced tools that we now have that might actually minimize, how many people do you need to build an app might drop from like 4 people to 1 person, you know what I mean? But at the same time, demand is going up too. So we'll have to see how those two curves intersect.
So these are the 10 reasons why coding is supposed to be the most important. Tell me if you think they're true or false. Coding skills are good for your career prospects. I would say true on that one. Yeah. I think that this isn't one of them, but I think everybody should know some type of coding. I've gone to those boot camps and I can tell you that, I was learning they were at Full Sail where, I was learning 1, 2, 1, 2 and try to make the ball move inside of the square. There was a box I was supposed to do. And I went, this is freaking hard because my mind is not wired that way. But I think it's just like any other language that if I sat down and I was playing with it, and I say playing with it every day, I would catch on to it because it's not nearly as intimidating as I originally thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's more than coding. It's the structured thinking that it teaches you that's also critical because you really start to think in terms of systems and algorithms and flowcharts and systems, which helps. I mean, that's why I like being engaged in so many different worlds is because each of those gives you a different mental model. So it's a model to have.
It is good. We are spending more on IT than ever. Well, that's got to be true because that is our future. And it seems like within the blink of an eye, everything is changing overnight. Like today, got into Google, I went, what just happened with Google? Where did this come from? Something else popped up. And it was creating a Google profile, and then it syncs everything up no matter what computer you're on. I'm going, okay, I'm going to have to figure that one out, but this is not the time to try and figure it out. So spending more, it's not just money, it's also time. You have to, the learning curve is huge, I think, when you spend on IT, anything in IT. E-commerce is growing rapidly across, they mentioned Australia. This was in Australia, but I think it's global, honestly. I think that in India, there is a big push in educational technology. And you can tell me if this is right or wrong, but I think India wants to be the next, I'll call it United States with education.
I would agree. Yeah, I think India has, from a software perspective, that's like the sexiest field to be in, and everybody is trying to send their son and daughter into the field because there's so much demand and there's so much human capital required. And India, if it has any capital, it's human capital, right? We have 1.3 billion, soon to be 1.4 billion people there. So from that point of view, education is massive because everybody's trying to learn, and the value of education is really high. Like, everybody knows that education is your path to get out of whatever situation you're in. And so, yeah, that's definitely true.
So the last point I'm going to touch on, because I know we're at the end of our show, is learning code is good for your brain. Absolutely, right? You've already validated that.
Well, honestly, learning anything is good for your brain, but yeah, software is of course helpful.
Yeah, because as you said earlier, it's helping you to see processes, workflows, things like that. So somebody that likes organization, I would think that they would like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things I was talking about earlier with my wife, is because her brain works so different than mine, and her background is so different from mine. Her worldview is so different from mine. And I think the biggest mistake that people can make, especially today in 2021, with having Trump follow Obama and all of this stuff that's going on in the political world, is polarization. And for me, that is the biggest challenge that humanity faces, probably even more than climate change. Because if you have polarization, it prevents us from mounting a concerted response to some of those bigger challenges. So honestly, that's the number one biggest issue for me. And that's, I believe, my superpower, is that I generally have the ability to see somebody who is 180 degrees on the other side of any argument. And I can still see the value in what they have to bring and what they are saying, and questioning my assumptions, because the moment you start thinking that your worldview is the perfect one is when we have issues.
Oh,
And
yeah.
part of it is, I don't want people to think like, hey, I'm a structured thinker, I'm an emotional thinker, I'm a visual learner, I'm a textual learner, whatever. Those are just boxes, and you can do all of the above, and you should be trying to do all of the above, because when you limit yourself, you're basically taking away from your own potential.
I would agree. Best mentoring advice that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say number one thing, stop watching Netflix. And
Okay.
get off social media. Please, I beg you.
Yeah. Well, there was this one really good movie on Netflix. I'm going to give it a plug, and it's a Coded Bias. And it was some MIT students, and they were really talking about how bias is something that is actually coded by programmers into facial recognition. Very interesting. I would definitely tell people to go watch it, because there's a way to take that away.
Yeah, absolutely. There's good stuff in there, but what's happening with those kinds of platforms like YouTube and
TikTok,
Facebook, TikTok, Netflix, all of those, is that it is reprogramming your brain faster than you can reprogram your brain. And that's the biggest problem, is because you're going to feel like that's how my day is supposed to be.
Right.
I'm supposed to spend X amount of hours this way. And that number just keeps going up. And so what happens is you have less time to really zoom out and think about what life you want to create and what opportunities you want to go after and how you want to, the effort that you want to put into certain things. And that is a major problem because you can't do transformation of yourself or others or your business or any of those things if you have this bowling ball chained to your leg.
Yeah,
So
it's a false reality.
it is a false reality. And so the main thing you need to do any of those things to achieve any of your dreams is time. And if you don't have time and you're going to give away your time for something that is less productive, that really prevents it. Because the second part of that is having two jobs, like having two activities, like a primary and a secondary, apart from family and relationships and all of those things, which are important, which is also going to be sucked away by Netflix and Facebook. You have to have a second thing that you're looking at from a career perspective. And that's how I've been all my life. I've always had a primary job and I've had a secondary thing out of curiosity, like a community activity or a group or something that I'm learning or a certification that I'm pursuing outside of work. And without that, you're really not going to be able to keep up with the pace of disruption that the world is going in. And it's just gonna, you're gonna feel further left behind. And then of course you're gonna get resentful. It's like, hey, why does so-and-so have all of this stuff? And how is this guy or gal getting all these opportunities? And the reason, they've been putting some effort into it.
Yeah, you're right. How can people reach you? What's your website, email address if you want to share it, social? I'm only active on LinkedIn. That's the only social channel I think is worth anything, but I'm sorry. I do the rest for business purposes, but.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is definitely my number one social media channel to reach me at. So search for Rajiv Menon Informulate. You'll find me on there. And then of course, feel free to reach out if you're looking for software solutions or digital transformation for your company or your business at hello@informulate.com. And happy to talk with you. And if you need help with anything on the software side, or if you have a startup that you're looking for some advice, or in the local Orlando community that you need to be pointed the right way, I am well connected on that front, and I'm happy to help point you in the right direction with funding or mentoring or technical advice.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to say thank you to our sponsor, Cat 5 Studios. Thank you to the production team, Becca Coffey, associate producer, intern, video and audio editing interns, Nick Morales and Alex Teal. Music by Dave Francis, Sophie Lloyd, Charles Fleming, and Elijah Sutton. And our sound effects by Matt Miller, Miguel Sintra, and Dave Francis. So employers, please visit us at Employers for Change, which is e4c.tech, to learn how you can upskill your interns, mid and senior level employees and be recognized as an employer of change. So thank you, Rajiv. I really appreciate you being here. I had a delightful time and I learned more about you that I just did not know.
Thanks, Isabella. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking the time. And I wish you all the best with this podcast, and I wish your listeners all the best as well in dealing with this uncertain future that we're all going to be a part of. And hopefully this podcast and your efforts help them navigate that.
Oh, thank you.